Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting day of world history. Today, we are going to be looking at what arguably is one of the most misunderstood ideologies in the world today, and that's communism. Obviously, after the Russian Revolution, you have this new wave and ideology that kind of backed workers' rights and down with government mentality that was fostered by Russian history and the Industrial Revolution and just the goings on in the world. As we go over these slides, you'll see attached is a note sheet. Make sure that you have that note sheet out and that you're kind of filling in all of the information as we go along. And then at the end, after we're done going over all the notes, you'll take a brief Google Forms quiz to make sure that you just got the information and that you're understanding everything that's kind of going on. So let's go. The first thing, communism is kind of the brainchild of this German man by the name of Karl Marx. And basically, Marx saw the conditions inside the factories and how workers were being treated after the Industrial Revolution and was just appalled. If you think back to any U.S. history classes you had when we looked at, what life in the factories were like for children, for immigrants, in the United States, it was just the same in Europe. Really low pay, tons of hours, and for the worker, while these factory owners were just getting rich beyond rich. And when Marx saw this, he blamed capitalism for the mistreatment of the masses because most people were workers and not business owners. And he decided to kind of uh, write down his feelings and how he thinks the economic system should look in this book called The Communist Manifesto. To understand the Communist Manifesto, you have to understand how Marx looked at capitalism. But first, there's something I want to make sure that these terms, capitalism, communism, socialism, that we're going to be using here, they get thrown around a lot, and I think they have a lot of political connotations. But you have to understand that the capitalism itself is an economic ideology. It doesn't necessarily equate to what your politics are or how you run your government. Same with socialism. Socialism is an economic ideology, and it doesn't really have a huge there's a wide varieties of socialist countries. There's socialist countries that are dictatorships. There's socialist countries that are democratic. So socialism, capitalism, communism, these are just economic ideologies. And the countries that have these economic ideologies have a wide array of political ideologies to go with the different economic ideologies. But for Marx, capitalism um, and the private ownership of industry, and it allowed for freedom of competition. But as we've seen with competition between countries, is it creates conflict, right? And everybody wants to make the most money. And the best way for me to make money is to run you out of business. The best way for me to make money is by paying my workers very little so more of the profits go to me. And this leads to unequal economic classes. I own the business, you work for me, I'm making all the money, you're making very little. And these unequal economic classes will lead to struggle. Nobody nobody wants to be poor. Being poor sucks. If you can, I don't care when in world history you look at or where in the world you look at, being poor always sucks. And it creates a struggle for people who don't want to be poor. And you have your upper class or, the bourgeoisie, and they're fighting against the workers or the proletariat. And we see this struggle throughout time. And this struggle between the classes, in Marx's eyes, is going to lead to a worker revolt against the upper class owners. Now, in the eyes of Marx, this worker revolt against the upper class must be violent. Why do you think, in Marx's eyes, the worker revolt had to be violent? Why couldn't the workers just take control of the factories themselves without the use of violence? I mean, the workers are obviously the majority of the population, so they have the numbers, and they don't need to use violence in order to take control of these industries. So why, in Marx's eyes, must they be violent? And the answer is kind of basic and simple when you think about it. If I were to take something from you, what would be your natural response? You know, to eventually try and take it back. So if this system that these workers are putting in place, if the workers are really going to truly take over business and not have to always be looking over their shoulder, worried about the bourgeoisie, worried about the upper class trying to retake control of industry, it must be violent. You need to kill them, right? You kill your opposition, there's no longer opposition. If you take something from someone and then you kill them, there's no one there to try and take it back from you. And that's one of the reasons why, in Marx's eyes, this worker revolt against the upper class must be violent. This violent revolution will lead to socialism. Now, socialism is not the end goal, obviously, of Marx's Communist Manifesto. Socialism, for him, is kind of like this stepping stone between capitalism and communism. You can't just go straight from capitalism to communism. He thinks it's just too big of a jump economically. So, to kind of get the system ready for communism, socialism is kind of like this intermediate step. And socialism will have this new worker run government, and the workers will own industry. The workers will own the banking system. The workers will be in charge of everything. And this will result in a new government where resources are redistributed to all equally. There'll be high taxes to support government, but as we kind of see with a lot of socialist countries around the world today, healthcare is free, right? You get sick, you don't have to, you just go to the doctor. You don't have to worry about paying for medicine. You don't have to worry about paying for your doctor visit. It's all covered by the government and the people's taxes. You don't have to pay for education. Think about what a lot of you are looking into colleges right now, and you're looking at how much college education is going to cost, and you're having to make some really difficult choices. Maybe you can't go to that out of state college. Maybe you can't go to that college that you want because of the financial um, costs. Maybe you can't. Maybe you feel like you can't even really go to college because of how much it's going to cost, and it's just not worth it for you, right? Now imagine that any college you wanted to go to anywhere in the country was free and it was paid for by the government. That might change your outlook on education. And if more people were getting education, that might be create a better society. So, but all that has to be paid for by the taxes. Other things in a lot of these socialist countries, work leave, paid maternity leave, paid vacation, paid paternity leave. If you look at some of these socialist countries in Europe today, if you are a woman and you have a child, you get 2 years off your job in which you are guaranteed to keep your job, and you are paid for those 2 years after having a child. If you are a man in some of these socialist countries and your wife has a child, you get a year off paid just for being there, just for being the father. You get a year off paid. And in some of these socialist countries, not only do you get 2 years off paid as a mother and a year off paid as a father, but every month the government cuts you a check for how much they think that child cost you that month. But in order for the government to cut everybody these checks, to pay for your health care, to pay for your education, to pay for these things, there has to be high taxes. Because where does government get its money from? So, in a lot of these socialist countries, your tax rate is at 55, 60%. So the government keeps anywhere from 50 to 60% of your paycheck each month. Um, where in the United States, for those of you that are working, the government right now in our country probably keeps about a third of your check. So you don't take home as much money, but some of these things, get paid for. You can see examples of socialism in the world today in places like Norway, Sweden, Germany, but also places like Mexico, Brazil, the Czech Republic, Venezuela. You know, there's all different types of socialist countries. And again, socialism is an economic system. So if you look at, the government of Venezuela and you compare it to the government of Sweden, those are very different political establishments, even though their economic ideologies are the same. And obviously, you can see some of the positives and negatives of this. Some of you may be like, I'm not giving the government 60% of my check, period. And that's fine if that's what you believe. Other people may be like, I would love for the government to be paying for my healthcare and my college education, and that's why we have different systems around the world today, is because different people have different views, and that's fine. And it can be good or bad. It can be good or bad. Free healthcare can be good, but you see, when the government relies on the people and taxes to pay for everything, and if their people aren't making money, then the government's not making money, and you have things like you see in Venezuela today, which is just mass food shortages and an underfunded government, and because of that, underfunded people and starvation. The goal of socialism is, again, this is in Marx's eyes. This isn't necessarily modern day socialism. This just goes back to the Communist Manifesto. The goal of socialism is to move all workers toward equality, right? To level the playing field, to eliminate class and therefore eliminate class conflict. Socialism, again, is meant to precede communism. It's a stepping stone to communism. You may be wondering what's up with the Smurfs, but the Smurfs lived in a communist society. I don't know how many of you used to watch Smurfs, but the little blue creatures living underneath and inside mushrooms were communists. They had no government, they had no currency, they had really no laws. They were just living. And that's why there's the picture of the Smurfs there. Now, communism is an advanced stage of socialism. It is a classless society. Classes as in economic classes, not, you know, social class. When everyone economically, politically, and socially are equal, well, then no government is needed, right? In Marx's eyes, class conflict, right? The economic classes is what causes conflict. Right? The reason that people commit crime is because they need something, or they see something that somebody else has that they can't afford or they can't get. And that's what causes conflict. But if we're all equal, if we all have the same thing, if nobody is higher or lower than anybody else, then you don't need to rob somebody, right? If my TV looks the same as your TV, then why do I need to steal your TV, right? If we if you make as much money as I do, then why do I need to steal from you, right? This is Marx's view. So when everyone is economically, politically, and socially equal, there's no need for government. Like, we all run things. There's no need for conflict, so government is not needed anymore. And I think that idea of a governmentless system that communists strives for is something a lot of people overlook. If we're all equal and we're all sharing everything, there's no need for money. there's no need for currency, right? We all just take a little bit of everything. If the workers own everything, if the people own everything, then you have all you need, and there's no need for currency. Eventually, communism will spread when other countries see how great communist countries have it. And again, in the eyes of Marx, there will naturally be workers' uprisings in all countries, and all countries will move towards communism. And once all countries become communism, there's going to be no need for national borders. And once communism has taken over the world, there are no borders, there are no government, there is no need for currency, and everyone on the planet is socially, economically, and politically equal. We'll have world peace. And that's what Marx is striving for. Um, why are countries such as North Korea, China, and Cuba called communist today? Well, it's basically that they're just run by a communist political party. The world has never really seen a truly communist country. If you go back and you look at, what communist is all about, according to Marx, you can obviously see that the Soviet Union was never fully communist, right? People were not economically, politically, socially equal. That just never happened, right? And it never has happened on a large scale in society. So these places that call themselves communist, these places that we refer to as being communist, are not communist, right? They may be run by a communist party. That doesn't mean that their economic system is communist. It just means they're run by a communist political party. I put a couple videos in here to give you a little bit more background information on communism if you want to watch them. It's nothing that you need to watch. It's nothing that's on your note sheet. It just kind of fills in some information. But this is what Marx and many of those in the Russian Revolution were striving for: this classless society, this equality economically, socially, and politically. This is what they were looking for. And this is how they kind of viewed to get there. And this is what the Russian Revolution was all about. So if you have questions, obviously let us know. Um, we'll have more on it today with the quiz. Make sure you take that. Make sure you're filling out the note sheet. And I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is staying safe, happy, and healthy. We miss you all. And for those of you that were messaging me, wondering why I'm not doing more of these, well, hopefully this is your fix. So I hope you guys are doing well, and take care.